Now, watch where you're putting your feet, Watson, and keep well clear of the track. Ah, do you see here? Yes, the marks of both tires, the one as deep as the other.
What does that mean?
A man's throwing all his weight onto the handlebars, trying to put on speed. What on earth can have happened here?
There's a great smudge all over the track.
Yes, he must have taken a fall.
Specks of blood on the heather.
And on the path. But what could have happened to him? There's no sign of any other living being.
The Priory School by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. Dramatised for radio by Michael Bakewell, with Clive Medicine as Sherlock Holmes and Michael Williams as Dr. John Watson, and featuring Norman Bird as Dr. Huxtable and Nigel Davenport as the Duke of Holderness. The Priory School.
Mr. Holmes! Mr. Sherlock Holmes!
Brandy, Watson, quickly, he's passed out. And throw me that cushion, will you? Here. He hasn't shaved. His collar's grimy.
Absolute exhaustion by the look of him.
Yes.
It may be that he simply hasn't eaten.
Well, here's his card. Dr. Thorny Huxtable, M.A., Ph.D., and yes, a return ticket for Mackleton.
Mackleton?
In a small town in North Yorkshire. It's not yet 12 o'clock. That's a very early start.
Oh, where am I? What's happened?
You lost consciousness. Nothing to worry about.
Oh, forgive me, Mr. Holmes. What an undignified thing to do. I've been a little overwrought.
No apologies necessary. May I present my colleague, Dr. Watson?
Would you like a little brandy?
Oh, thank you, no. If I might have a glass of milk and a biscuit, I have no doubt that I should feel better.
Yes, of course, Doctor, straight away.
Please sit down.
Oh, thank you. I thought it best to come in person in order to ensure that you would return with me. I feared that no telegram would convince you of the absolute urgency of the case. I wish you to come with me to Mackleton by the next train.
I fear that will hardly be possible. Oh, I'm retained in the case of the Ferrers documents, and the Abergavenny murder is coming up for trial. Now, only a very important issue could call me from London at present.
Important issue? Have you heard nothing of the abduction of the only son of the Duke of Holderness?
Holderness, the former Foreign Secretary?
Exactly. We tried to keep it out of the papers, but there was some rumour in the Globe last night, and I thought it might have reached your ears.
Your milk and biscuits, Doctor.
Holderness. Watson, if you'd be so kind as to read me what we have on the Duke of Holderness.
Yeah.
The fourth volume on the right, Watson.
Right, yes, Holmes, I have.
Dr. Huxtable insists it's a case of the utmost urgency.
Quite so. Hogsworth, Holden... yes, here we are. Holderness, 6th Duke, KC, PC, CDL, POM, GMR.
Half the alphabet.
He also holds the title of Baron Beverley, Earl of Carston, married Edith, daughter of Sir Charles Appledore, 1888, owns about 250,000 acres, Lord of the Admiralty, 1872, Chief Secretary of State for...
How are the milk and biscuits going down, Dr. Huxtable?
Thank you, Mr. Holmes. I'm quite recovered. I am aware that you take a very high line in professional matters, and that you are prepared to work for the work's sake.
It has been known.
I may tell you, however, that His Grace has already intimated that a cheque for £5,000 will be handed over to the person who can tell him where his son is, and another 1,000 to him who can name the man or men who have taken the boy.
A princely offer. Watson, I think that we shall accompany Dr. Huxtable back to the north of England. And now, Doctor, will you kindly tell us what has happened?
Certainly. And
why you come here 3 days after the event?
How can you know that?
By the condition of your chin, Doctor.
Yes, precisely.
I must inform you, gentlemen, that the Priory School, of which I am the founder and principal, is the best and most select preparatory school in England. Lord Leverstowe...
Dr. Huxtable, I did not ask for a prospectus or a testimonial. I thought this was a matter of urgency.
Quite so, Mr. Holmes. I felt that my school had reached its zenith when 3 weeks ago the Duke of Holderness sent his secretary, Mr. Wilder, with the intimation that Lord Saltire, 10 years old and the Duke's only son and heir, was about to be committed to my charge. Little did I think that this would be the prelude to the most crushing misfortune of my life.
To the point, Doctor, to the point.
The boy arrived on the 1st of May, that being the beginning of the summer term. I trust I am not being indiscreet, but I must tell you that he was not entirely happy at home. It is an open secret that the Duke's married life had not been a peaceful one, and the matter had ended in separation by mutual consent, the Duchess taking up her residence in the south of France.
Oh, yes, of course. It was in all the papers. The less reputable society columns had quite a field day.
The boy missed her dreadfully, and it was for this reason that the Duke desired to send him to my establishment. In a fortnight he seemed quite at home and apparently completely happy. The first I heard that something was wrong was at 8 o'clock on Tuesday morning.
Dr. Huxtable! Dr. Huxtable!
What on earth's the matter, man? You shouldn't run in the corridors. It sets a bad example to the boys.
It's Lord Saltire, Dr. Huxtable. He's disappeared.
What on earth are you talking about?
Well, come and see for yourself.
It all looks perfectly normal to me.
He must have climbed out through the window sometime during the night.
Why should he want to do that?
He must have climbed down by the ivy. He didn't go through the outer room. Merton and Cheadle Minor sleep in there, and they saw and heard nothing.
And what about the boy that shares with Lord Saltire? What's his name?
Caunter. He says he heard nothing at all, and he's a very light sleeper, I believe.
Which would seem to rule out any possibility of violence or a struggle. It would appear that Lord Saltire went of his own accord.
There's something else you should know.
What's that?
No one can find Mr. Heidegger. It looks as though he's vanished as well.
And who exactly is this Heidegger?
He's the German master. His room is on the 2nd floor.
Is that the same floor as Lord Saltire?
Yes, it's at the far end of the building and faces the same way as the boys' room. Heidegger kept his bicycle in a small shed nearby, and that too was gone.
And what can you tell me about him?
He came with the best references, of course. He's been with me for 2 years.
What manner of man is he?
Silent, morose, not very popular with the boys.
What did you do next?
We made inquiries at Holderness Hall. It's only a few miles away. We hoped that the boy might have gone back to his father in an attack of homesickness, but nothing had been heard of him there. The Duke was greatly agitated.
But why did you not come to me sooner? Having let 3 days go by, you start me on my investigation with a very serious handicap.
I am not to blame, Mr. Holmes. His Grace was extremely anxious to avoid any public scandal.
But surely there must have been some sort of official investigation.
Oh, yes, there has. As luck would have it, there was a report of a boy and a young man leaving a nearby station by an early train. And then last night we had news that they'd been traced in Liverpool and that they had no connection at all with the boy's disappearance.
I suppose the local investigation was relaxed when this false clue was being followed up.
It was entirely dropped.
So the whole affair's been most deplorably handled.
I feel it and admit it. But should we not be leaving for Euston as soon as possible? The Mackleton train leaves within the hour.
Quite right, Doctor, quite right. Watson, would you be so kind as to order us a four-wheeler?
There are times when I think it might be simpler if I were to change places with Mrs. Hudson.
You know, we must look on the bright side, Dr. Huxtable. Perhaps the scent is not yet cold, despite the fact that so much time has been wasted.
What particularly puzzles me is that there seems to have been no connection at all between Lord Saltire and Herr Heidegger. The boy was not in his class, and as far as I know, he never exchanged a word with him.
That's certainly very singular. You said that Heidegger took his bicycle. Did the boy have a bicycle?
No,
Was any other bicycle missing?
no. We made a point of checking that.
But you're not seriously suggesting that this German master of yours rode off upon a bicycle in the dead of night bearing the boy in his arms?
Certainly not.
Then how did they travel?
Yeah, tell me, did anyone call to see the boy on the day he disappeared?
No one.
Did he get any letters?
Yes, there was one letter.
From whom?
From his father.
How can you be certain of that? Do you open the letters of your pupils?
I run a school for the sons of gentlemen, Mr. Holmes.
And how did you know it was from his father?
The Holderness coat of arms was on the envelope, and it was addressed in the Duke's peculiar stiff hand. Besides, the Duke remembers having written.
Did the boy ever have letters from France?
No, never. Well, I don't see what letters have to do with it.
If the boy was not carried away by force, something must have prompted him to go off into the night of his own free will. And the most likely form of prompting would have been a letter.
That's quite right, Watson. Tell me, Dr. Huxtable, that last letter of the Duke's, was it found in the boy's room?
No, he'd evidently taken it with him.
So, a boy of 10 wanders off into the night, seemingly on foot and for no apparent reason, accompanied by a German tutor on a bicycle whom the boy has never conversed with. Yeah. Quite an intriguing little mystery. Hey, Watson?
Dr. Huxtable! Dr. Huxtable!
What on earth's the matter, man?
The Duke of Holderness is here, Dr. Huxtable, and his secretary, Mr. Wilder.
Oh, where are they?
They're waiting for you in your study, Doctor.
I see. Very well. Come, gentlemen. I will introduce you straight away. Good evening, Your Grace.
Yeah.
Good evening, Mr. Wilder. Let me
I
introduce...
called on you this morning, Dr. Huxtable, but I was too late to prevent you starting for London. I was told by Mr. Linden that you were gone in search of Mr. Sherlock Holmes with the object of inviting him to undertake the conduct of this case.
that is so.
His
And
Grace is surprised that you should have taken such a step without consulting him.
But when I learned that the police had failed...
His Grace is by no means convinced that the police have failed.
But surely, Mr. Wilder, the situation is so
You are
grave
well
that I-
aware that His Grace is particularly anxious to avoid all public scandal. He prefers to take as few people as possible into his confidence.
The matter can easily be remedied. Mr. Sherlock Holmes can return to London by the morning train.
Hardly that, Doctor, hardly that. I find your northern air so pleasant and invigorating that I propose to spend a few days upon your moors, and I'll occupy my mind as best I may. Whether I have the shelter of your roof or of the village inn is, of course, for you to decide.
Dr. Huxtable, I cannot but agree with Mr. Wilder that you would have done better to consult me. But since Mr. Holmes has already been taken into your confidence, it would indeed be absurd that we should not avail ourselves of his services.
I may be able to throw some light on the problem.
You must forgive my lack of courtesy, Mr. Holmes. I should be pleased if you would come and stay with me at Holderness Hall.
I thank your grace, but for the purposes of my investigation, I think it would be wiser for me to remain at the scene of the mystery.
Just as you like, Mr. Holmes. And if there is any information that Mr. Wilder and I can provide, do not hesitate to ask.
I would only ask you now, sir, whether you formed any explanation in your mind as to the mysterious disappearance of your son.
No, sir, I have not. There is no way in which I can account for it.
Your Grace, I've no desire to intrude upon a painful private matter, but I fear I have no alternative. Do you think that the Duchess may be involved in any way?
No. No. I do not think she had anything to do with the matter.
Well, the most obvious explanation is that your son's been kidnapped for the purposes of levying a ransom. You've not had any demands of that sort?
No, sir.
One more question, Your Grace. I understand that you wrote to your son on the day when this incident occurred.
No, I wrote the day before.
Exactly, but he received it on that day.
I presume so.
Was there anything in your letter which might have unbalanced him or induced him to take such a step?
No, sir. Certainly not.
Did you post the letter yourself?
His Grace is not in the habit of posting letters himself. The letter was placed with others on the study table, and I myself put them in the postbag.
Yes, you're certain that this one was among them?
Yes, I noticed it.
How many letters did your Grace write that day?
Oh, 20, 30. But surely this is somewhat irrelevant.
Not entirely.
For my own part, I have advised the police to turn their attention to the south of France. I've already said that I do not believe that the Duchess would encourage such an action, but it is possible that my son may have fled to her, aided and abetted by this German teacher. My son has some very wrong-headed notions. That is all I have to say. I think, Dr. Huxtable, that Mr. Wilder and I will now return to Holderness Hall. Good night, Mr. Holmes. Good night, Mr.
This is my colleague, Dr. Watson.
Good night, gentlemen.
Gentlemen?
I will see you to your carriage, Your Grace.
Obviously not the kind of man who relishes discussing his intimate family affairs with strangers.
Oh, I'd like to have questioned him further. No matter.
So, what now?
I think we should take a look at the boy's room, and Herr Heidegger's, particularly the latter. It may still hold something for us.
Heidegger obviously left in a hurry. His bed's been slept in, but something must have disturbed him. When he got up, he didn't even bother to put on his shirt or his socks.
There was a full moon on the night of the 13th. He could have seen the boy making his way across the lawn and gone after him.
He scrambled down the ivy. You can see where it gave way under his weight.
But which way did they go, Watson? Yes, that's what we have to find out. I'll go down into the village, make a few inquiries.
Shall I come with you?
No, Watson, no. I don't wish to arouse too much interest. Wait for me in your room.
Ah.
I'll call in on you when I return. You weren't asleep?
Oh, no, I must have nodded off. Probably a long journey.
I've acquired a large ordnance map of the neighbourhood. Yes, we can spread it out on your bed. The landlord of the Red Lion seems a man of infinite resource. Have you any matches, Watson?
Yes, of course.
Here. Thank you. Yes, this case grows upon me, Watson. There are decidedly some interesting features. It should not be too difficult to trace the trail of our fugitives. Now, see here. This dark square is the Priory School. As you can see, it stands directly on the main road which runs due east and west.
And no side road of it for a mile in either direction.
So, if Heidegger and the boy went by road, it must have been this main road. Now, as it happens, we're able to check what passed along the road during the night in question.
How's that?
Well, at this point here, where the first side road on the east meets the main road, there was a night watchman who was on duty all night.
How did you come across him?
And the man was at the inn. He didn't leave his post all night, or so he says. And he's positive that neither the boy nor the man could have gone that way without him noticing them.
He might have nodded off.
He swears not. I'm inclined to believe him.
So, that covers the road in that direction. And what about the other way?
Well, as it happens, the landlady at the Red Lion was taken ill that night. Her husband had sent to Mackleton for the doctor, but he didn't arrive until the morning. The people at the inn were looking out for him all night. They declare that no one passed by. So we can eliminate the road in both directions as far as our fugitives are concerned.
But what about the bicycle?
We'll come to that presently, to continue our process of deduction. If these people did not go by the road, they must have gone across country, either to the north or to the south.
Quite a problem.
Not a very great one. To the south of the school, as you perceive, all is arable land, intersected by stone walls.
Not the kind of ground for a bicycle.
Quite so. Now, let us look at the country on the other side. Immediately to the north of the school, there's a grove of trees, you see? It's marked here as the Ragged Shore.
Oh, yes, I
And
see.
beyond that stretches a great rolling wilderness, and that's called Lower Gilmore. It extends for 10 miles and slopes gradually upwards. On the west side of it's Holderness Hall, 10 miles by road, but only 6 across the moor. Beyond that, the hills, yes, they rise very steeply.
But I still don't see why the man took a bicycle.
Oh, come now, Watson. A good cyclist doesn't need a high road.
You think there might still be some traces?
Yes, there's a watercourse marked on the map. In some parts, it looks as if it widens into a morass. Yes, there's certainly a chance we might find some tracks there, despite the dry weather. I'll call you early tomorrow morning, Watson.
Nothing. We've been searching hours. There's not a sign of them. They can't have come this
There's
way.
no other route they could
But
have
we've
taken.
searched the whole line of the watercourse. Nothing but sheep marks and cattle tracks. Not a sign of the bicycle and not a single footprint.
There's another morass just beyond that gorse over there, and a narrow neck of track running between. Maybe something there. Huh?
I think that your night watchman fell asleep. The boy wouldn't have come this way.
Now, wait. What's this?
The track of a bicycle.
Yes, a bicycle, certainly, but not the bicycle. I'm familiar with 42 different impressions left by tyres. This, as you can perceive, is a Dunlop with a patch on the outer cover. Heidegger's tyres were Palmer's, leaving longitudinal stripes. Aveling, the mathematical master, was short upon that point. Therefore, it is not Heidegger's track.
The boy's, then.
Yeah, but there's no evidence that the boy had a bicycle. The only machine that was missing was Heidegger's. And look, this track. It's made by a rider who was going from the direction of the school.
Or towards it.
No, Watson, don't you see? The more deeply sunk impression is, of course, the hind wheel upon which the weight rests. You can see several places where it's passed across and obliterated the more shallow mark of the front one, you see? Yes, it was undoubtedly heading away from the school.
Well, it may have no connection with our inquiry at all, of course.
Yes, just so. Well, we'll follow it backwards before we go any further.
Precious little to go by. A few marks where the bicycle crossed that spring back there, but nothing much else.
Enough for us to know that he was following this path. You see where it leads?
Yes. That little wood just behind the school.
Yes, the Ragged Shore, which means that the Dunlop tyre may indeed have something to do with the case. But what? Yes, it is of course possible that a cunning man might change the tire of his bicycle in order to change his tracks. A criminal who was capable of such a thought is a man whom I'd be proud to do business with.
So, what now?
Well, we must leave the question undecided and return to our morass again. Yes, there's a miry path that leads along the lower part of the bog. Where to find any trace of our fugitives, it must surely be there.
If they did come this way, would have been a tricky business by night. The bog must be quite treacherous.
Ah,
What is it?
a track and a fine line of telegraph wires. That is the Palmer tire, Heidegger's bicycle.
The marks are just about clear enough for us to follow.
Watch where you're putting your feet, Watson. Keep well clear of the track. Now, do you see here? The prints of both tires, the one as deep as the other.
What does that mean?
Well, our man's throwing all his weight onto the handlebars. He's trying to put on speed. Now, what the devil's happened here?
There's a great smudge all over the track.
Yes, he must have taken a fall.
Specks of blood on the heather.
Yes, and on the path. He must have come off his bicycle and then remounted. But I still can't make out what happened to it. There's no sign of any other living being. It's just cattle.
He might have been gored by a bull.
No, most unlikely. Now, let's press on. He can't have got very far. He was bleeding so much.
That gorse bush over there. I saw a gleam of metal.
The bicycle. It must be.
It's covered in blood. Holmes, there's something on the other side of the bush.
Poor devil.
Good God. His skull's crushed in. How on earth could he have managed to keep up the chase?
Brave and determined man, Watson. Shoes, but no socks. He was wearing his nightshirt under his coat.
What on earth are we going to do with him? We can't just leave him here.
We've lost too much time already. We can't afford to waste another hour going for assistance. The boy's life may depend on it.
There's a man cutting peat. Way over there by those trees.
Ah.
We could send him with a note to Dr. Huxtable, and he could then lead the police back to the body.
Capital suggestion, Watson. Yes, that will leave us free to pursue our investigations. I want to see if we can find any further trace of that patched Dunlop tire.
We've been tramping round for the best part of 8 hours. We're covered in mud and not much the wiser. The last glimpse we had of that tire was half a mile back. Do you think there's much point in going on?
We certainly won't gain anything by giving up now, Watson. Our cyclists could have been making for Holderness Hall over the village over there. And since Holderness Hall's unlikely to contain any surprises for us, I suggest we try the village. Yes, the people of the inn may be able to tell us something.
The Fighting Cock. Looks a pretty squalid sort of place. And I suppose that villainous-looking character at the door is the landlord. What on earth's the matter?
Yes, it's my ankle. I think I've twisted it. I can scarcely walk on it. Help me over to the inn.
Yeah. Rest your weight on me. That's the way.
Mr. Hayes? Mr. Reuben Hayes?
Who are you? And how'd you get my name off so pat?
It's printed on the board over your head. And it's easy to see a man who's master in his own house.
What do you want with me?
I suppose you haven't got such a thing as a carriage in your stables?
No, I haven't.
But my friend can hardly put his foot on the ground.
We shouldn't put it to the ground, then.
But he cannot walk, man.
Then he can hop.
Look here. This is rather an awkward fix for me. I don't mind how I get on.
Neither do I.
The matter's very important. I'd offer you a sovereign for the use of a bicycle.
And where would you be wanting to go?
To Holderness Hall.
Oh, friends of the Duke, are you?
Well, I'm sure he'll be glad to see us.
And why's that?
We bring him news of his son.
You mean you're on his track?
He's been heard of in Liverpool. They expect to find him every hour.
Well, there's not much love lost between the Duke and me.
What do you mean by that?
I used to be his coachman. They sacked me without a record. Just because he listened to the lies of a cowardly corn chandler.
Yeah, but you'll help us, surely.
I'll do what I can.
Well, we'll have some food first, and then you can bring round the cycle.
I haven't got a bicycle.
A sovereign, remember.
I haven't got one, I tell you. But you can have 2 horses as far as the hall.
Very well, Mr. Hayes. We'll talk about that when we've had something to eat.
The food's about as appetizing as the landlord's filthy countenance. I would never have believed that good, simple food could be so maltreated.
Something tells me that we may be close to the heart of the mystery in this sordid place. We need to turn it over in our minds, what we've so far discovered. Now, let's begin with Lord Saltire. Now, I'm certain that the boy left of his own free will. He got down from his window, and either he went off on his own, or someone was with him.
So the unfortunate tutor must have witnessed the boy's flight from his bedroom
Yes,
window.
but why did he take the bicycle? Why didn't he run after the boy and overtake him? I mean, he could have done that easily enough if the boy were on foot. Yeah, so the boy must have had some swift means of escape.
There must have been another bicycle.
No, we can't be sure of that, Watson. No. The German meets his death 5 miles from the school, not by a bullet, mark you, which even a boy might conceivably discharge, but by a heavy, savage blow dealt by a vigorous arm.
Which only bears out that the boy had someone with him.
And their flight must have been swift, since it took 5 miles before an expert cyclist could overtake them. Yet, when we survey the ground about the scene of the tragedy, what do we find?
Nothing, except a few cattle tracks. The nearest track of the other bicycle was miles away.
Yes, and there were no human footmarks.
Holmes, this is impossible.
Yes, admirable, a most illuminating remark. It's impossible, as I stated, and therefore I must, in some respects, have got it wrong. Now, I'm certain that Reuben Hayes must have played a part in all this. If we can work out what that was, the mystery may not be so impossible after all. Yes, the inn yard seems empty enough. Let's take a look at the stables.
But your ankle, Holmes?
Oh, yes. Do you know, Watson, I'm so consumed with curiosity that I suspect I shall scarcely notice it. Yes, just as I suspected. The horses have old shoes on their hooves, but they're shod with new nails. This case deserves to be a classic, Watson.
What do you think you're up to? What are you doing in here?
Why, Mr. Hayes, one might think that you were afraid of our finding something out.
You're welcome to all you can find. I don't care for folk poking about without my leave. So that the sooner you pay your score and get out, the better I shall be pleased.
Very well, Mr. Hayes. No harm meant. We've been having a look at your horses. Yes, but I think we'll walk after all. It's not far, I believe.
I thought you could scarcely put your foot to the ground.
Oh, yes, the pain seems to have gone completely. I can only put it down to your excellent hospitality.
That man knows everything that has happened. I am sure of it.
Yes, certainly a most self-evident villain. We were warm, as the children say, in that inn. I seem to grow colder at every step I take away from it.
Yes. There's a cyclist coming down the hill.
Get down, Watson. He mustn't see us.
Surely that was Wilder, the Duke's secretary.
With a look of horror on his face that I've rarely seen on mortal man. He's going to the Fighting Cock. Now, let's put ourselves at a point of vantage where we can see without being seen.
Sun's nearly gone. It's getting cold.
Someone's coming out of the inn. What do you make of that, Watson?
He's driving that trap, as if all the hounds of hell were at his heels. Was it Hayes?
It was certainly not Mr. Wilder. He's waiting there at the open door.
Someone's coming. It's impossible to make out who it is in this light. Wilder's taken him in.
Now, what in the world is James Wilder doing in this den at this hour of night? And who's the companion who comes to meet him? Come, Watson, we must really take a risk and try to investigate a little more closely.
I say, Holmes, this must be Wilder's bicycle.
Yes, with a patched Dunlop tire. Yes, Wilder and his guest, whoever he may be, are up above. See? Where that lighted window is. I must have a peep through it, Watson.
And I know exactly what you're going to ask. My back is at your disposal.
Yeah, thank you.
Why do you have to wear metal studs in your boots?
Just a moment more, Watson. Good.
only you could carry your carpet slippers with you for occasions like
Come, my
this.
friend, our day's work's been quite long enough. I think I've gathered all that we can. We'll walk back together across the moor. You shall go to the school and comfort Dr. Huxtable, who will doubtless be deeply distressed by the news of Heidegger's death.
And what are you going to do?
I'll go down to Mackleton Station. I need to send a few telegrams.
And then what do we do?
Get a good night's sleep, Watson.
Mr. Holmes, Dr. Watson, I am sorry, gentlemen, but His Grace cannot receive you. The fact is, the Duke is far from well. He has been very upset by the tragic news.
Dr. Huxtable sent him a telegram, I believe.
I must see the Duke, Mr. Wilder.
But he's in his room.
And I must go to his room.
I believe he is in his bed.
I will see him there.
Very well, Mr. Holmes. I will tell him you are here. Perhaps you will be so good as to wait in the study.
Thank you, Mr. Wilder, and pray impress upon His Grace that we shall not move until he comes.
You are confident that you have solved the mystery?
It's all falling into place. Remember the cow tracks on the moor, Watson?
Yes, they were everywhere. On the path most of the time, and particularly where poor Heidegger met his death.
Yet how many cows did you see on the moor?
I don't recall seeing any.
Yeah, strange, is it not? Now, throw your mind back. Can you recall that those cattle tracks were sometimes 2 by 2, sometimes 8 on one side, 4 on the other, sometimes alternating?
Oh, God, I cannot remember them that
I
exactly.
can. I could swear to it. And it's a very remarkable cow that walks, canters, and gallops.
Good Lord. But what on earth...
Mr. Holmes, what is all this about?
It really is most distressing for His Grace to be
I think,
subjected...
Your Grace, that I could speak more freely in Mr. Wilder's absence.
But, well, if Your Grace wishes.
Yes, you better go.
Very well.
Now, Mr. Holmes, what have you to say?
I've been informed that a reward has been offered in this case. I would like to have that confirmed from your own lips.
I confirm it.
It amounted, if I'm correctly informed, to £5,000 to anyone who will tell you where your son is.
Exactly.
Another 1,000 to the man who will name the person or persons who are keeping him in custody.
Exactly.
Under the latter heading is included, no doubt, not only those who have taken him away, but also those who conspire to keep him in his present position.
Yes, Mr. Holmes. If you do your work well, you'll have no reason to complain of niggardly treatment.
I think I see your Grace's cheque-book upon the table. I'd be glad if you'd make me out a cheque for £6,000. The Capital and Counties Bank, Oxford Street branch, are my agents.
Is this a joke, Mr. Holmes? It's hardly subject for pleasantry.
I assure you, Your Grace, my colleague is not joking.
What do you mean, then, Mr. Holmes?
I mean that I have earned my reward. I know where your son is, and I know some, at least, of those who are holding him.
Where is he?
He is, or was last night, at the Fighting Cock Inn, about 2 miles from your park gate.
And whom do you accuse?
I accuse you.
Oh?
And now, Your Grace, I'll trouble you for that cheque.
The Capital and Counties Bank, I think you said. How much do you know?
I saw you together last night.
Does anyone else know? Besides your friend, Dr. Watson?
I've spoken to no one.
I shall be as good as my word, Mr. Holmes. I trust that you and your friend here are men of discretion.
I hardly understand, Your Grace.
I must put it plainly, Mr. Holmes. If only you two know of the incident, there is no reason why it should go any further. I think £12,000 is the sum that I owe to you, is it not?
I fear, Your Grace, that matters cannot be arranged so easily. There's the death of the schoolmaster to be accounted for.
But James knew nothing of that. You cannot hold him responsible. It was the work of the brutal ruffian whom he had the misfortune to employ.
I must take the view, Your Grace, that when a man embarks upon a crime, he is morally guilty of any other crime which may spring from it.
Morally, Mr. Holmes, no doubt you are right. But surely not in the eyes of the law. A man cannot be condemned for a murder at which he was not present, and which he loathes and abhors as much as you do. The instant he heard of it, he made a complete confession to me. So filled was he with horror and remorse. Mr. Holmes, you must save him. You must. I appreciate your conduct in coming here before you spoke to anyone else. At least we can take counsel how far we can minimize this hideous scandal.
Exactly. I think, Your Grace, that this can only be done by absolute and complete frankness between us. I'm disposed to help you to the best of my ability, but in order to do so, I must understand to the last details how the matter stands. I realize that your words apply to Mr. Wilder, and that he is not the murderer.
No, the murderer has escaped.
Your Grace is perhaps unaware of my colleague's reputation in the world. Criminals do not slip through his hands so easily.
Reuben Hayes was arrested at Chesterfield on my information at 11 o'clock last night.
Oh, you seem to possess powers that are hardly human. I am glad to hear that Hayes is taken, if it will not react upon the fate of James.
Your secretary?
No, sir. My son.
I confess that this is entirely new to me. I must beg you to be more explicit.
I will conceal nothing from you, Mr. Holmes, however painful it may be to me. When I was a young man, I loved with such a love as comes once in a lifetime. I asked the lady to marry me, but she refused. Refused for my sake, because she thought that such a marriage would prejudice my career. And when my position was assured, it was too late.
I take it that the lady in question is dead.
She left this one child, whom for her sake I have cherished and cared for. I could not acknowledge to the world that I was his father, but I gave him the best of education, and since he came to manhood, I have kept him close to me here.
Did Mr. Wilder know that you were his father?
It was my intention that he should never know. But a little over a year ago, he found out my secret. I need not tell you the power it gave him over me.
And it was this that caused the breakdown of your marriage.
I freely admit it. James conceived a terrible hatred for my legitimate heir.
And yet you continued to keep him here under your roof.
I could see his mother's face in his. For her dear sake, I could not send him away. But I feared that he might do Arthur, Lord Saltire, some mischief, and I sent the boy to Dr. Huxtable's school for his own safety.
How did Mr. Wilder come to be acquainted with that rascally landlord?
James always had a taste for low company. The fellow had been a tenant of mine, and James acted as my agent. He knew that Hayes bore me a grudge, and when he determined to kidnap Lord Saltire, he availed himself of the rogue's services. You have already deduced, I think, Mr. Holmes, how James communicated with Arthur.
By inserting a note into your own letter to him, asking the boy to meet him in the Ragged Shore.
He used the Duchess's name, and in that way got the boy to come. That evening, James cycled over and told Arthur that his mother was longing to see him. She would wait in the wood at midnight, and Arthur would find a man with a pony outside the school. The poor boy believed it all, of course. Hayes had his own horse and led Arthur and the pony off onto the moor.
And the German teacher saw the boy and went after him.
James told me that Hayes struck the poor man down with his stick and that he died of his injuries. Arthur was confined in the upper room at the Fighting Cock. When I first saw you 2 days ago, I had no more idea of the truth than you.
Well, what did Wilder hope to achieve?
He intended to make a bargain with me. He would restore Arthur if I would break the entail and make it possible for him to inherit all my estates. He knew very well that I would never call in the police. When the news of Heidegger's death reached us, James was so overwhelmed with horror that my worst suspicions, which had never been entirely absent, were instantly confirmed. I accused him, and he confessed. He implored me to keep the whole affair secret for 3 days longer so as to give Hayes a chance of escape.
And you assented?
I yielded, as I have always yielded.
Even though you were exposing your son to further unnecessary danger by leaving him in that vile den for 3 more days?
I was given the most solemn promises.
What are promises to people like that? killing was a most unjustifiable act. I will help you, but on one condition only. It is that you ring for the footman and let me give him such orders as I like.
Of course, Mr. Holmes.
I must warn you that you've placed yourself in a most serious position in the eyes of the law. You've condoned a felony and aided the escape of a murderer. For I have no doubt that the money James Wilder gave to Hayes to assist his flight came from your purse.
That is so.
You rang, Your Grace?
You'll be glad to hear that your young master is found. It's the Duke's desire that the carriage shall go at once to the Fighting Cock to bring Lord Saltire home.
I will go immediately, sir.
Now, having secured the future, we can afford to be more lenient with the past. I am not in an official position, and there's no reason, so long as the interests of justice are served, why I should disclose all that I know. As to Hayes, I say nothing. The gallows awaits him, but I've no doubt that your Grace could make him understand that it's in his interest to keep silent.
Some measure of financial provision for his family, perhaps.
An excellent suggestion, Doctor.
I would warn your Grace, however, that the continued presence of Mr. James Wilder in your household can only lead to misfortune.
It is already settled that he shall leave me forever and go to seek his fortune in Australia.
In that case, your Grace, since you have yourself stated that any unhappiness in your married life was caused by Mr. Wilder's presence, I would suggest that you make such amends to the Duchess as you can, and that you try to resume those relations which have been so unhappily interrupted.
That also I have arranged, Mr. Holmes. I wrote to the Duchess this morning.
There is one small point on which I desire some light. This fellow Hayes had shod his horses with shoes which counterfeited the tracks of cows. And was it from Mr. Wilder that he learned so extraordinary a device?
I think the explanation is not far to seek. Come and look in this cabinet. These shoes were dug up in the moat. They are for the use of horses, but they are shaped below with a cloven hoof of iron.
And it was these that made the tracks we found.
A little mud still clinging to this one.
My ancestors were not above a little marauding and cattle stealing. They were designed to throw pursuers off the track.
Thank you. They are the second most interesting object that I've seen in the north.
And the first?
The cheque that you were about to write.
Oh, of course, Mr. Holmes.
Although, in some cases, I'm prepared to work for the sake of the work alone, in this instance...
Yes, Mr. Holmes.
You are the 6th Duke of Holderness, Baron Beverley, Earl of Carston, while I...
While you...
While I am Mr. Sherlock Holmes.
Your cheque for the specified amount.
Thank you, Your Grace. I am a poor man.
In The Priory School, Sherlock Holmes was played by Clive Medicine and Dr. Watson by Michael Williams, with Nigel Davenport as the Duke of Holderness and Norman Bird as Dr. Huxtable. James Wilder was played by Mark Straker, Reuben Hayes by John Church, Lyndon by Ian Masters, and the butler by Eric Allen. The violinist was Leonard Friedman. The Priory School was dramatized for radio by Michael Bakewell and directed by Enid Williams.